All right, so section 4.4 is all about perpendicular lines. The goal is to write equations for and to graph perpendicular lines. So last week we learned about parallel lines. We learned that parallel lines have the same slope. Today we're learning basically the complete opposite of that. We're learning about perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect to form right angles. Now, we don't talk a lot about right angles in algebra. It's more of a geometry concept, so you'll learn a whole bunch about right angles next year. What you need to know now is that right angles are angles that look like this. They cross sort of like a perfect crisscross, like the corner of a room or the corner of a doorway. They're angles that are like perfect square angles. Okay, and we mark them in geometry with like a little box. But most of the angles that you encounter in your everyday life are right angles. So like where the wall meets the floor, that's a right angle. Or where the floor meets the door, that's a right angle. Or where the side of the door meets the top of the door, that's a right angle. So any two lines, it's like a perfect intersection. They're crossing just right, make a perfect little square. Those are called right angles. And the important thing to know for our class, for algebra, is that perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So parallel lines have the same slope. Today we're doing the total opposite of that. We're doing perpendicular lines. They have opposite reciprocal slopes. Do you guys have any questions? So you guys know what opposite reciprocal is? You guys know what that is? No, but no one's going to ask what it is? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I am when you get done writing this. Okay, opposite reciprocal. You need to write this down. Means that you take a flat fraction, you flip it, and you change the sign. So we're going to practice on these four numbers. We're going to find the opposite reciprocal. Okay, so the first thing we want to do to find the opposite reciprocal is you have to start with a fraction. So the number 3, if I wanted to write that as a fraction, what would it look like? 3 over 1. I want to write the number 3 as a fraction. Any whole number can be written as a fraction by putting a 1 over it. Or sorry, a 1 under it. Put it over 1. Now, to find the opposite reciprocal, I need to do two things. I need to change the sign and flip the fraction. So flipping it would give me a 1 over 3, and changing the sign would give me a negative. So if it was negative, you make it positive. If it was positive, you make it negative, and then you just flip it. That's the opposite reciprocal. So negative 2, what do I want to do first? Put it over 1. Then I want to flip it and change the sign. It was negative, so my answer should be positive. So just 1/2. All right, next one, it says 2/5. What should I do with that? It's already a fraction, so I want to flip it. That would be 5 over 2, and then what do I want to do? Make it a negative. Very good. And the last one, negative 1/3. Flip it, which would give me? Okay, and it was negative, so I want my answer to be positive. Good. So that's opposite reciprocal. So this is what we're going to do with the slope in all of our problems today. And then it's very, very similar to what we were doing last week where we were just writing equations. What are your questions so far? So today's problems will look a lot like last week's, but instead of the word parallel, you'll see it replaced with the word perpendicular. So make sure you're reading these problems to see which one you're doing. So we're doing perpendicular. So we want a line perpendicular to y equals 2 over 5x minus 4. When we were doing parallel, the slope was always the same, right? So we just pulled the slope out and used it. We can't do that today. We have to do an extra step. So I want you to put a place on each problem for the old slope and the new slope. What is the old slope of this line? 2 over 5. So m is 2 over 5. We want the opposite reciprocal of that. So my new slope will be what? 5 over 2, and you make it a negative. So the new slope is negative 5 over 2. Once you find the new slope, it's just like a problem from last week. We have the m, we're given the b right here. So b is going to be 6, and then you can write your equation in y equals mx plus b form. What is my equation here? Very good. What are your questions? I keep trying to say, what are your equations? I'm sorry. Mixing up my thoughts. What are your questions? So remember, you take the slope, you flip it, change the sign, and then you write it in y equals mx plus b using the new b. We do not care about the old b. It's irrelevant. Does anyone need more time with this problem? Okay. So what is the slope of the line we're trying to be perpendicular to? 2. So the old slope is 2. How am I going to find the new slope? Yeah, start by putting it over 1 and then flip it. So the new slope is 1 over 2, and you make it negative because it was positive. So my new slope is negative 1/2. What's my new b? 9. So what's my equation? Very good. Raise your hand if you have questions. All right, here's number 3. We can shorten it up again. So the important information is that we're going to be perpendicular to y equals negative x plus 7, and we want our y-intercept to be negative 4. So what is the old slope? Negative 1 over 1. And that was from right here. There is no number in front of the x, just a negative sign. We know that that means negative 1, and I want to write it as a fraction, so you put it over another one. So what's the new slope? Positive 1 over 1. Very good. And what's my new y-intercept? Negative 4. Very good. So my equation is plus negative 4, or you can just put minus 4. Very good. Another thing, if you want to clean this up, the 1 over 1 is not actually necessary. You could just leave this y equals x minus 4, and then it's just sort of implied that there's a 1 there. Either one of these is fine. Raise your hand if you have questions. All right, here's number 4. Again, you can shorten it by writing the important parts. We want a line that's perpendicular to y equals negative 3 over 4x plus 12 with a y-intercept of 6. There are 6 examples today. So give yourself some space for the old slope and the new slope. What's the old slope? What's the new slope? 4 over 3. Very good. Flip the fraction, change the sign. It was a negative, now it's a positive. What's the new b? 6. Very good. So my equation is? Great. What are your questions? So in your notes, I just want you to write the b. Hold on, here we go. Write the b and then just write everything I write as I'm writing it. So this is what's important for right now. I also need to find m. You need m and b for every single equation you write in this chapter. First, let's find the old m. How am I going to find the old m if I want to be perpendicular to this line right here? Pick 2 points on that line. Very good. And then find the rise over the run. So the rise over the run here is 1 over 1 because you're going up 1, then right 1. So the old slope is 1 over 1. What's the new slope? Negative 1 over 1. You still flip it and change the sign. So I have the b right here. I have the m right here. Am I ready to write the equation? Yes. What is the equation of our line that's going to be perpendicular to this one? Negative 1 over 1x. What was the rest of it? Plus 2. Very good. Don't forget that negative sign. Now, that is where you can stop in your notes. I'm not requiring that you graph it for your notes, but you will have to do it in your homework, so make sure you're still paying attention. When we graph, we start with the y-intercept. We start with the b value here. So I'm going to start at the 2. Then I'm going to go down 1, right 1 because of my rise and my run. Down 1, right 1. Then connect those 3 points. And then stop and ask yourself, are these making like perfect crisscrossing lines that form like square angles here? Yes, these look like perfect right angles. I know my lines are perpendicular. If you are getting lines that look like this, you accidentally did parallel. Or if you're getting lines that look like this, you just did it wrong, okay? So make sure that they are forming perfect right angles. Remember, right angles are just like perfect square angles like you'd see at the corner of a room. What are your questions? All right, we have one more example. Again, you don't need to do the graphing part. You can just do the equation part with me. So here is the b that we want. I want it to be perpendicular to this line. So what do I need from this line? Yes, I need to find the old slope. We find the slope by finding 2 points and then counting the rise and the run. So find 2 points where you know for sure the graph is crossing. There's my 2. So how would I get from the first one to the second one? I'd have to go down how many? And then right how many? 3. So the old slope is negative 2 over 3. What's the new slope? 3 over 2, positive. So I have my B and I have my M. Can I write the equation? I can. What is it? -4. Very good. This is where you can stop. However, I'm going to continue with the problem. I'm going to graph it. So I start at the B value, which is -4. Then I am going to rise 3 and run 2. So up 1, 2, 3, right 2. Up 1, 2, 3, right 2. And then connect it with something super straight. Then pause and ask yourself, are these lines perpendicular? Are these lines perpendicular? Yes, they're just crisscrossing just perfectly. Any questions on the problems on the board? So we want a y-intercept of -1 here, and we want it to be perpendicular to this line. What shall I do? Find the old slope. What is the old slope? Pick any 2 points. Find your rise and your run. What is the old slope? The old slope. Yeah, I always start from the left point and go to the right point, so it would be down 1, right 1. So I'm going to write it as -1 over 1. If you have 1 over -1, that's completely fine. So what is the new slope? 1 over 1. You flip it, you change the sign. So 1 over 1. So what is the equation that I need to graph? Y equals what? 1 over 1x -1. Good, because you're using this b. Very good. Now, I have to actually graph this. The b tells me where to start, so I'm going to start at -1. My slope is 1 over 1, so from there I need to rise 1 and run 1, rise 1 and run 1. Once you have 3 points, you can get like your ID or the side of your notebook or something super straight and connect those 2 points with a straight line. And then just pause and make sure that you are convinced that these lines are perpendicular. Make sure you have the graph and the equation for 7 and 8 on your homework. Raise your hand if you have any questions.